Well, I guess we can get started. My name is Charles Bromley. I'm the director of the Ohio Fair Lending Coalition, and I welcome everybody here. This is hard to believe that we have well over 100 people and 150 people registered for this event. And so we're pleased to have everybody here and hope that everybody can enjoy this seminar on Cuyahoga County housing. But before we get into it, just a quick shout out to Americorps. We, for 10 years, had Americorps Vista volunteers with us. For those of you who do not know it, Americorps Vista is the equivalent of the Peace Corps. And Catherine Chevenak is this year's Peace Corps Vista volunteer and has been doing a terrific job with us and with the work that we have. And to all the other people who serve with nonprofit agencies, and many of you will have Vistas who are out there and working with us. Also this week, when I was watching the morning shows roll around, they actually had something on housing on CBS, and it was a story about FHA discrimination in lending and about wealth building. And every week or every month, they have a story about the difference between home ownership between blacks and whites. And the number in this morning's Wall Street Journal was 70% whites home ownership rate and 40% for African Americans. And the number just seems to get bigger and bigger. But anyhow, this was a story about Bergen County, which is a suburb outside of New York, outside of Jersey. And it was a story about a woman that I know who is now 94 years old. Her name is Lee Porter. And Lee Porter led the Bergen County Open Housing Task Force. She was the task force. She was the one person on it. And she's still working at it today. She has a cane. And she was the woman who worked with Cory Booker's family to get them a house in Bergen County back in the early 60s. And so, Cory Booker is now a U.S. Senator, and open housing is still a struggle that we have today. Cleveland is still one of the most segregated metropolitan areas in the country. And maybe as we move forward with the housing program here in Cuyahoga County, we can break some of those obstacles down and we can make progress on it. So without further ado, much thanks to all of our sponsors, to the people who serve on the steering committee. You've made a real difference with this program. I never would have believed, and we used to have 30 or 40 people down at CSU. To have well over 150 people registered for this event is amazing to me. And we're reaching a lot of people that I don't think we would have reached had it not been for this effort. We're also working in conjunction with the Ohio CDC Association, so we're getting people from throughout the state of Ohio. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Frank Ford, who is the moderator for this panel, and turn it over to him. Frank, it's all yours.
Thank you. Catherine, can you go ahead and display the agenda? So first thing, I just want to walk you through what we're going to do. We'll do very brief panel introductions. There'll be also brief panel opening remarks. And then I will be doing a brief presentation of recent housing trends research that I've just finished literally yesterday. And then we'll go into a discussion with the panel, and we have some questions that have already been developed, but there may be other questions that might come up. And finally, we'll conclude with an open discussion with audience. And if you could, you can start putting questions into the chat, and we will keep track of those. And when we get to that point in the agenda, we will try to take those as they've come in. So back to, if you could scroll back up, Catherine. So the panelists, Cheryl Stevens, county councilwoman and chair of the Cuyahoga County Council Community Development Committee. Paul Hertig is Deputy Chief Economic Development Officer of the Cuyahoga County Department of Economic Development. Kim Kimlin is Chief Operating Officer, Cuyahoga County Land Bank. Patrick, I've known you for so many years, I just don't say Patrick. Pat Kenney, Chief Operating Officer, CHN Housing Partners. Andy Nikiforos, Executive Director of Community Housing Solutions. And there is one addition, Gus Frangos, CEO and General Counsel of the Cuyahoga Land Bank, is also joining us. And actually what we're gonna do here on the panel's opening remarks, we're gonna shift this a little bit. And Gus is going to do the land bank opening remarks, and he does have limited time, so we're going to have Gus go right now. Gus, are you available to give us the background on how the county housing program came about? And then I'll go from there to Councilwoman Stevens and Paul Hertig.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Can everybody hear me?
I think so.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, good. Just as a preliminary, I'm looking at all the people on this call, and I'm just thinking to myself, where would the county be, and where we would be without everybody doing all that they're doing on this call? I mean, it would be disastrous, I think, coming out of the foreclosure crisis. So kudos to everybody on this call and for all that you're all doing. My comments as to how we got here from the perspective of the Cuyahoga Land Bank is that when we were several years ago, a few years into after we opened up our doors, which was in 2009, the county council decided that it would be a good idea, notwithstanding everything we were doing, what everybody else was doing, that there'd be a housing study. And to make a long story short, that resulted in a very good initiative. It was headed up by Mark McDermott, and it was the County Housing Stakeholders Group. And it was, what I thought was really great about it is that it actually incorporated so many different facets of housing. It had legal aid, it had housing solutions, it had the CDC's, affordable housing, homelessness, everybody that, every advocacy group that touched upon housing was a part of that group. And although, you know, we all know what the issues have been for many years, this was an opportunity to restate them, update them, provide data so that this study could be some tool that we could take and craft a program out of. So when that when that study was finished, it was presented to the county council, and it was again a very, very good study. The only thing that was missing, of course, was millions and millions of dollars to fund all of the issues that were brought up in that study. So there was, I don't think I'm out of line by saying there was some indigestion with the council about that issue because it was, you know, kind of throwing up their hands and saying, we know everything that needs to be done. This is a great study, but where are we going to get the funds to do this kind of thing on such a large scale? There was some discussion about, well, can we just do a pilot? Maybe let's throw $3 or $4 million at it. And that was not, from my perspective, watching the hearing and being at it, it was not entirely well received, not because it was not a good thing. It just didn't address, you know, the large scale issue, and at least some of the leadership on the council at that time did not want to get into a check the box kind of a program and then call it a county housing program. So after that meeting, some officials from the Cuyahoga Land Bank and the leadership of the council at that time got together and said, well, the demolition programs, hardest hit fund, the county's program, they're starting to wind down. And so we were looking into the future, and the thought is that in as much as those funds a year looking forward are going to probably dissipate, and there'll be a transition into more housing activity, could we take the Cuyahoga Land Bank's DTAC fund and incorporate that into a future housing program that was responsive to at least many of the things that were brought up in the study, but admittedly not everything. So as long as it required the county, however, to front end load some of that initiative so that the county land bank could transition out of a demolition heavy program and transition into a housing program, meaning that at that time, we still had a $25 million budget that we were servicing all the demolitions that were coming through the land bank, roughly 100 properties a month were still coming through. We had to triage and field service all those properties to the tune of about $250,000 a month, you know, cutting the lawn, removing the tires, boarding up, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to transition that activity, which was not funded by our DTAC, our core funding, nor was it funded by any of the demolition programs per se, the county agreed to front end load that for a couple of years. And Kim's going to show you the budget or the county housing program budget and how that ties into what I'm saying. And ultimately, that would then get us to the place where, starting at the time that we would start the program, which was last year, we would be able to, in 6 years, put roughly $25 to $30 million out onto the street for the various issues and needs that Kim is going to discuss: appraisal gap, rehab, all that kind of stuff. So, but that was the genesis of it. And at that time, when we suggested incorporating our DTEC funding in the aftermath of the demolition programs, the county leadership asked us to help take what the Cuyahoga County Housing Study and then turn it into a proposed county housing program, which we did, which the county council then modified, and it kind of went back and forth a little bit. And hence, that's what you see in the Cuyahoga County ordinance that passed, creating and establishing the Cuyahoga County Housing Program. There's a lot more, I'm sure, from other stakeholders' input, but the DTAC, the Cuyahoga Land Bank's DTAC funding is the key to the program, because that's what's putting the, as I said, the $25 to $30 million out onto the street as a result of transitioning out of demolition. Demolition is still urgently needed, and there are efforts underway both at the federal level and at the state level to try to keep that going. So that's a real broad overview, and that concludes my remarks in terms of how we got the program started.
Thank you, Gus. I'm going to turn it over now to Councilwoman Stevens. Go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. On behalf of my colleagues on Cuyahoga County Council, I want to tell you that we believe that this program is a response to the diversity of needs across Cuyahoga County. There isn't one exclusive solution, but housing is so fundamental to creating a better community. Why? Because it is a significant piece of the American dream. For me and my family, and for many of other people of color, the home ownership route is the way to build wealth. So when we think of the American dream, we think about getting a decent education. There's the concept that every American will, through public school, have at least a shot at a decent education. If they invest themselves in their education and do the best they can, then they'll have skill sets to get a good job. And if they manage themselves well at their good job, then they'll be able to save a little bit to someday own a home of their own. And when they own a home of their own, they're capable of building wealth if they live in the right location, because location is everything when it comes to the appreciation of value in a home. And that's why we're all here today, in part, because that valuation, the problems with appraisals, the problems with the historic redlining, it presents a problem when people do all the right things. One of the most wonderful things about owning a home is that if you invest and care for it, it should conceptually appreciate in value. And in 3 to 5 years, again, depending on the location, you'll have a nest egg. That nest egg can help you send your kids to college. That equity, which is the nest egg, can do sorts of other things for you, like help you start a small business. Or if you don't ever touch it when you get ready to retire, it can be a significant piece of your retirement income stream, so that you can spend time as a snowbird from Cleveland and go to warmer places to live a portion of the year where it's a little inclement here. Or for us in the government sector, the public sector, and the nonprofits, when a neighbor buys a home and invests in it, Have any of you ever had flower envy? There's this guy who bought the house down the street from me. His flowers look better than mine, and I hired a landscaper to help me with my flowers because I'm so into so many other things. And I noticed that neighbors around him began to invest more in their flowers and in what their shutters look like, and it goes on. So we have a block of people investing because they want their house to look as good, if not better, than a neighbor's. That investment is wonderful from the public sector perspective because that means that our houses are valued more. When a community's houses continue to be valued at a higher level, then we don't have to do levies as often for our school systems. The small increment in Ohio that you get for municipal governments, that's going to increase because the basis is higher. There are all these wonderful things that happen because we invest in housing. But most importantly for people of color, it is how we can build our own personal wealth. That's why you see such a gap in how wealthy families who have similar jobs, own similar houses, but live in different locations across the county. So that an African-American family that lives in a neighborhood of Cleveland with a house that was built at the same time as a house in Lakewood, if they had bought the house in Lakewood that was almost identical to the house that they bought in Collinwood, they'd have a house that had a higher value, even if they were exactly the same age, and even if they bought the house at exactly the same time. There's an issue of fairness that we're missing there. And how we incrementally as a county government find ways to invest is incredibly important. And one of the best things that county government does is partner. We partner with the land bank. Our investment in the land bank has made a tremendous difference in how Cuyahoga's land bank can operate. I'm slightly biased. I know about it. I lived with it. I was one of the people that Gus kicked out of the door to go home and go to sleep. Because our mission was so important at the land bank. There's the partnerships we have with many of y'all who are in municipal government. The community development investments are incredibly important because of what we do with each individual community, tying it to their needs, whether it's Rocky River or it's Bedford. What we can do in a variety of communities that meet their needs is incredibly important. So we've tried to create different ways to do different things. For the non-urban communities, we work with them through our community development block grant dollars. We created a special fund with the casino dollars so that we could provide additional services. We are committed to making sure that we don't just partner with one group, but find ways to partner with as many groups as possible who are committed to understanding the value of housing, not just to an individual, but to the collaborative community as a whole. And at Cuyahoga County, since we all share the same first name, the work of the staff who report to the executive is incredibly important because they do the daily due diligence. And many times the ideas that the county in general gets credit for are delivered on a daily basis. And since I also used to be county staff, I think I've sat at every form of the table that you can sit at in a variety of chairs. We know that the work that the staff does on a daily basis to make sure we facilitate access to capital and consume and believe and evaluate new ideas is incredibly important. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for partnering with Cuyahoga County in the diversity of ways that you have, and continue to be patient with us because remember, we're the largest form of government out there, and it takes us a while to move, but we do understand the needs that are presented, and we love the fact that you're all willing to work with us. Thank you, Chip, for inviting me to speak here. Frank, for your technical support on the details of what is good housing, and especially to the staff at County Council and the staff in the County Department of Development for making sure that we actually understand the elements of the American dream and how difficult it is to achieve today. and how much we can help to make it easier for the residents of Cuyahoga County to achieve that dream. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm going to turn it over to Paul Herdig to give opening remarks on behalf of the administration.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Thank you, Frank. And it's difficult to follow Gus and Cheryl, but I will try. As the county staff in the administration, we have a couple responsibilities. One is to make sure that we continue to elevate the issues of housing and housing policy within the administration so that they're seen as an important part of the county's strategy going forward. I want to acknowledge the great work that was done by Ken Surratt, who served in the administration for a number of years and really led a good part of the work with the stakeholders, coordinating, collaborating with our land bank, with council, crafting a sound housing policy, but not just leaving it there, but continuing the collaboration with the land bank and council as that moved towards actual legislation and putting dollars behind the policy. But I want to assure everyone that the administration continues to take housing just as seriously. It's a high priority for us, and we will continue to work in close partnership with the land bank and, of course, guided by council and policy to execute what needs to be done. So under the legislation that council passed, there was one area of responsibility that our department, the Department of Development, was asked to concentrate on, and that was in assisting people to remain as homeowners and then to become homeowners. So two areas. In terms of remaining as a homeowners, the policy work identified a shortage of funds, of capital, for homeowners to make repairs to those homes. Sometimes because their appraisals had gone down due to no fault of their own, so they had no equity for a bank to lend on. Sometimes because just their struggles in life, limited income, they didn't have the amount of income necessary to actually afford a loan for the repairs they needed. So one area we were asked to concentrate on was funds for home repairs. The second area was in what's called small dollar mortgages, where there's a known problem in banking where bankers are compensated in such a way that they tend to focus more on the high volume deals. All the mortgage lenders who work on commission make more money when they make loans for more expensive houses in the suburbs. So partly because some other factors, it's very difficult for a first-time home buyer to actually get a mortgage to purchase a home in an inner ring suburb or a Cleveland neighborhood where the values are not very high. So this was specifically called out as an area that needed some attention. We worked in collaboration with the land bank. I want to acknowledge not only Gus, but Kim Kimlin, who's going to speak as a key partner here. We worked with council. I want to acknowledge Khalil as council staff. And through an open competitive process, we accepted statements of qualifications and made awards for work in both these areas. So currently there's $1 million a year being directed to these two areas. In the area of home repairs, it's going through CHN Housing Partners and Community Housing Solutions, led by Andy Nikiforos. In the area of small dollar mortgages, we're initially focusing on working with CHN Housing Capital to leverage a greater amount of funding for mortgages for first-time home buyers through loan guarantees. Reports are coming in on these. We work together with the land bank. So just recently, the first semi-annual report was presented to council as of the end of January. And these reports show that both these programs are starting to make a difference. The home repair program is taking off the most quickly. I'd be happy to talk further in the question period, but just want to indicate once again, this is an example of the importance of collaboration among all county agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to turn it over now to Patrick Kenney with CHN Housing Partners to talk about their role. Pat? You're muted.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you all participants and partners. Like Frank said, my name is Pat Kenney, and CHN has been doing this for 40 some years. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, and we're primarily known as an affordable housing provider, but really over the years we've developed an ability to integrate a lot of services to residents of both the city and the county as well. And I've listened to Cheryl talk about equity and home ownership. And for us, we've been able to been investing in that for years, and both from a market rate program early in the 90s and early 2000s, but then more our flagship program, our lease purchase effort, where it's kind of a 15-year tax credit. We've been able to convert over 1,300 of those families into direct home ownership, and they own their property. We actually did the mortgage financing as a seller. They got in and they got out within a 5-year period, and now they have taxes and insurance and maintenance to handle and nothing else. And so when you talk about equity building, Cheryl, it's absolutely right. And the more we can convince more people to take that step, and then also offer those opportunities in those vehicles, in those kind of ability to create lending products that actually fit with all walks of life from both the city and various municipalities throughout the county, that's going to make the difference. So, we got our experience doing our own CHN properties to a degree where it became so successful. We formed CHN Housing Capital about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and really trying to look at the response of the mortgage desert, just like everyone is speaking about, that the capital access both for home repair, but also for first mortgages is just really limited because of the economics, because people can make more money doing it with larger loans. So we have moved into this space, and with this first season, the spring buying season, we will be opening our first mortgage throughout all of Cuyahoga County. It will address exactly what people have been talking about. Our mortgages will be able to be at $30,000 and above. We'll have credit scores that are more at 570 and above. DTI at 40, housing cost at 30. So what we're trying to do is really create a product that will allow people to have an opportunity to buy their homes and have equity throughout all of both the city and the county. And the other piece also is, as they had spoke about with the home repair. I mean, access to capital, when you talk about equity, and when you talk about homeowners who have these needs for these ongoing maintenance and ongoing repairs, when that's denied, when there's not a facility out there, in the prime lending that will provide for that, all that, both that depreciation and repairs just start messing with the market values, just as Cheryl was speaking about. So that's another whole piece that we've started. We work with the counties, administer the county's program throughout for the home repair, and then with this new effort here through the both county and land bank, we will be doing mortgages throughout Cuyahoga County, and really just being there to provide these facilities both on the first mortgages and the home repair. So we're really excited. This spring season is going to be a big buying and a big home improvement season, we could tell right now. So, just from a perspective of having great partners and working both with the county and all of the partners here, we're excited about helping move this needle. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Pat. And we'll conclude the opening remarks with Andy Nikiforos with Community Housing Solutions. Andy?
Thank you, Frank. Community Housing Solutions is a countywide nonprofit. We serve 2,500 households every year through different programs, but they're all targeted to low and moderate income homeowners. We have 4 contracts with Cuyahoga County, 2 for home repair and 2 for our housing counseling program. So for home repair, which does about 800 jobs a year, we have 1 contract which provides dollars, and it's grant dollars, for furnace and hot water tank replacement or repair. And then the most recent one is actually a contract through the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, and it's really focused on home repairs and health and safety items. So things like heating systems, electrical, plumbing, and security and accessibility. Again, most of those dollars will either be grant or will be a deferred second mortgage. And then we have 2 contracts with the county for housing counseling. One, which supports the counseling financial literacy initiatives. It allows us to work with families that are behind in their mortgage payments, their real estate taxes, and their utility bills. And the second one is to provide direct financial assistance to assist mortgage delinquent homeowners who have been affected by COVID. So it could be loss of employment, could be reduction in hours, similar kinds of things. Finally, I want to make a couple of comments in terms of, the people that we serve. The home repair program, 85% of the homeowners that we work with are over the age of 60. And the average income is $20,000. So it's really families that struggle financially. And now 50% of the home repair jobs that we do are in suburban communities, usually in a ring. With the housing counseling program, again, the average age of the people that we work with is 60, and the average income is a little over $20,000. Again, families that really struggle. And a third of the counseling clients are families that live in the inner ring suburbs. So I really thank the for supporting these kinds of initiatives, because it really provides direct assistance to people who are struggling financially. And it also allows CHS to generate other public and private resources. And so it's not just the county dollars, but the county dollars allows us to get probably another $4 million or so in support for our counseling program as well as the home repair program.
Andy, thank you very much. What we're going to do next, as it turns out, it's somewhat coincidental that I was just completing, as we were planning this event, I let people know that I was going to be completing research, updating housing trends research that I do annually, been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And Catherine, can you confirm, does that look like it's coming up okay?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, so I've got 15 minutes to do this. I'm gonna maybe hopefully do it even less, but I'm actually setting a timer for myself. So housing market recovery, looking at 20 years, actually 21 years, 2000 through 2020. I'm going to keep going down. What's the summary of this? There's 4 key things. One, and many of you already know this, that much of the county, due to COVID-19, there's been a shortage of homes for sale, resulting in higher demand and higher prices. Some communities, such as South Euclid in particular, in the inner-ring suburbs and some of the west side neighborhoods, Ohio City, Detroit, Shoreway, and Tremont, have seen particularly high increases in 2020. But that very robust market activity is not equally distributed throughout all the county. And in particular, neighborhoods and regions of the county with majority African-American populations are not sharing in this same hot market. I'm going to skip this slide. Just by the way, this presentation is going to be available. I think that Chip Romley is going to be posting it to the website after today. A couple of things I want to point about what is different about this research. Number one is, if you saw the recent reports in the Plain Dealer, they come out every January, usually with research on home sales data. That data is limited to single family only. I'm including 1 to 3 family, which the significance of that is side by side and up and down doubles. 20% of Cleveland is in that category. So it's, in my view, it's important to include that. My research is not limited to the MLS. I know a lot of people cite the median home sales from the MLS, but that's going to be only if somebody listed the home with a realtor. There are many homes that are sold in distressed housing markets in the east side of Cleveland, eastern suburbs. They're not listed. I do exclude sheriff sales because that would give an unrealistically low view of the housing market. And of course, just noting that county appraisals are every 6 years. The research I'm doing is every 1 year. Just some possible COVID-19 factors. In October 2020, the Akron Cleveland Board of Realtors, Association of Realtors, issued their market data report and found that listings on the MLS were down 49% from the year before. And the number of the days of the properties were on the market was down 33%. So fewer properties, but they were selling much faster. This created a seller's market. And here's something to think about. Are sellers reluctant to have buyers, home inspectors, and real estate agents coming into their homes? That could be one reason why there's fewer homes on the market. Or are sellers holding on to their assets in an uncertain economy? And then are sellers worried that I put my home on the market, it sells quickly, do I have time to find the new home? Because that's something I have to figure. But here's a very positive thing at the bottom here. For the first time in years, these higher prices mean that many people who were underwater are now no longer underwater. They were able to sell their home and actually break even or make even some money. Arm's length sales, this just looks at the number of sales. Again, this is not the MLS. This is all the sales that I referred to earlier. There is a dip. You can see countywide, there's a dip in Cleveland as well. Next slide shows the 5 Cuyahoga regions with Cleveland, the outer suburbs increasing. Cleveland, that dip that I showed you before. East inner suburbs, slight dip. West inner suburbs is pretty even. East side of Cleveland went down and the west side of Cleveland went down. So fewer homes being offered, homes selling quickly, sale prices are up. And that's been reported widely in news media, and that's true. But the degree of recovery is not consistent in all submarkets in the county. Vacancy and abandonment and blight still undermine market recovery in majority African-American communities. And I noted that Gus made a point of saying that money for blight removal is still needed. We shouldn't assume that somehow we're beyond that. Here's the interesting county residential vacancy. You can see it was declining steadily, really for most of the last decade. But what happened in the last 2 years, it didn't decline. It's actually gone back up somewhat. And there could be a number of reasons for that. One is that much of this decline was the removal of the most blighted structures through demolition. Demolition money has been not exhausted completely, but it's certainly not as available as it used to be. So this is something we ought to pay attention to, that vacancy is actually going back up. And then when you look at where is vacancy occurring, the bar on the left is the east side of Cleveland, 81% African-American. The next is the east inner suburbs, 52%. These are the majority African-American communities in Cuyahoga County. Outer suburbs, west side, west inner suburbs, far fewer vacant properties, predominantly white communities. So here's the arm's length sales median price over the 21-year period, looking at the regions that the 5 regions I just showed you, plus Cuyahoga County in dotted red and Cleveland in dotted blue. And you can see the good news is that there's an upward trend everywhere. It's just that the upward trend is not the same. You've got outer suburbs and west inner suburbs and Cuyahoga generally are actually at the highest point they've ever been. So their peak year is now. So they're at 100%. But when you get to the east inner suburbs, you're down at 82% recovery. And then, of course, the east side of Cleveland is only at 44% recovery at $35,000 median home sale price compared to its prior peak, which I'm guessing is right about $80,000 here. This is the west inner ring suburbs. Every one of them is 100% recovered, and actually their highest year is just last in 2020. Predominantly white, 96% white population. This is the 13 west side of Cleveland neighborhoods. A little bit of a mix here. You've got these extraordinarily high increases. Most notably, look at this Detroit Shoreway, the increase in Detroit Shoreway just over the last 5 years. Really, these communities are doing extremely well. A second grouping a little bit lower, Stockyards, Clark Fulton, Brooklyn Center, Cadell they're at 65, 70% recovery, which is similar to some of the east inner suburbs. Then you've got the east. Well, actually, I thought I'd already mentioned that. I was getting ahead of myself. These are the 9 east inner ring suburbs, which at the top you've got Shaker and University Heights at 100% recovery at their highest point right now. You've got Cleveland Heights 89%, South Euclid, and notice the increase in South Euclid here, very steep in just the last year. Then you've got the other communities in the east inner suburbs are most of them grouped. The rest of them are grouped in the 60s and 70% recovery. Warrensville Heights is a little bit of an anomaly, dipped down slightly. Although you'll notice when you look at these trends that there's occasionally a dip and then it comes back up. So I'm not sure that Warrensville Heights should be too concerned about that. And finally, you get to the East Cleveland with really, it's essentially a median home sale price that's equivalent to an East Side Cleveland neighborhood, which brings me to East Side of Cleveland. 13 East Side of Cleveland neighborhoods, an extraordinary drop in median home sale price in between 05 and 08. Again, the good news is this has got an upward momentum with virtually all those communities. Buckeye Shaker has a pretty steep increase in the last year. Fairfax has a pretty steep increase in the last year. So there's good news there, but this is the community that's 81% African-American, was hard hit by predatory lending, subprime lending, foreclosure, abandonment, and blight. And those factors are still undermining a robust recovery and suggest that there still are resources needed to help these communities recover. Just the last two slides, I just wanted to show you the east side of Cleveland, the same east side neighborhoods, but put in perspective with University Circle. University Circle is one of the hottest neighborhoods in Cleveland with a median sale price now of $233,000. And my last slide is same thing, but I decided to add Central because Central is to some extent an anomaly also on the east side with all the with a close proximity to downtown, extensive new home construction over the past decade. Although one thing to note about Central is that the number of sales are very small, so some caution has to be used when interpreting this data, and the prices are bouncing around a little, but it still suggests that the activity in Central is generally better than most of the east side neighborhoods. Last thing I want to show you is in the version you will get off the website, there are 3 attachments. They have detailed tables showing every neighborhood, all 21 years, the median home sale prices for every neighborhood in Cleveland and every suburb. And let's see, how did I do? I'm looking at my timer. I have 5 minutes left. I won't use that because we're actually 5 minutes behind. So I think I helped everybody catch up here. Feel free to put any questions if you have any in the chat, and we'll try to get those when we get to open questions. I'm going to turn the floor back over to, hold on a second. So we've got our panelists, and we have some questions that are preset. We're not going to limit ourselves to those, but I'm going to start with asking any of the panelists that want to address this, that we have in the program, we have a definition of something called emerging markets and future markets. And I wonder if any one of the panelists or more than one could define that for us, and maybe even define it in connection with some of those east side neighborhoods, if you could. And who would like to take a shot at that?
Frank, I'd be happy to do that.
Sure.
So the ordinance had called for 2 of the components of the program. There's really 3 components of the program, and maybe I'll just start there real briefly. Catherine, could you pop up the second of the slides that I'd sent over to you, just so people have some framing for this?
Yes. Do you mean this one?
The next, the other one. There's one more.
This one?
That one, yes, that one. Thank you. So there's 3 components to the overall program. There's home renovation component. This includes the land bank's in-house renovation and its deed and escrow renovations. The housing market component, and this has to do more with new construction, infill, strategic investment, trying to spur others to invest in new housing, strategic planning, and strategic demo. And then the third component is the homeowner assistance component, which Paul talked about. And this is the home repair assistance and small down mortgage assistance that is being rolled out through the third-party providers represented today by Community Housing Solutions and CHN. So if you can just flip then to the map, Catherine. The ordinance had called for that the housing market component and the home renovation component be limited to what's called the emerging market. And this is both affordable and middle market neighborhoods where the lack of reliable real estate comps has resulted in a cycle of structural disinvestment. And this just really goes back to what Frank was just reporting on about how just the lack of mortgages, the mortgage desert, lack of sales, which means lack of comparables, has really meant that this area has seen very little investment, very few sales. So what we had done to create this map of the emerging market was that the ordinance had said that the land bank should identify this boundary. So we started with all the census tracts in the county, and we started by eliminating what the ordinance defined as the high market tracts. And this is where median single family home values were at 175% or higher. So those were taken out. And then to get more to the issue of disinvestment, we looked at the median sales prices in 2019, eliminated tracts where the sales price was above 150,000. And then the final cut was looking at this issue particularly about comps. We looked really and included only the census tracts where there was a high volume of sales, but without a lot of home purchase mortgages as reported in the HMDA data. So if people were able to get mortgages, that sort of lies outside of this boundary. So this is really what we came up with as the emerging market. It includes about 40% of the county population lives within this red boundary. And it includes a very large part of the city of Cleveland, particularly on the east side, and parts of, or all of 13 suburban communities as well. So the other thing that was mentioned in terms of markets in the ordinance was future markets. And future markets are really areas where there's been very deeply ingrained disinvestment. And where the private market just has not been willing to invest for a long time. And so these would be areas, they're not on the map, but there are areas like East Cleveland, perhaps like the Forgotten Triangle area of Cleveland. So these are really the deeply disinvested areas. And that ties in with where the funds can be used for like strategic planning type activities.
Does anyone else want to, on the panel, make any further comments before I move on that point? Then the next question was, what has been accomplished over the past 1 year in terms of renovation, home repair, and we did include demolition, although well, Kim, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know that you could comment on that.
Yeah, why don't I just start with demolition?
Sure.
We did not use any of the funding under the county housing program in 2020 for demolition. It's actually not an eligible use during the first year of the 6-year program. But we did do 550 demolitions. We are still using HHF funds and of course the Cuyahoga County demolition program. As far as the home renovation component of the program, we use the funds to support redevelopment of 7 homes that we renovated on an in-house basis. And also to facilitate renovation of 24 homes under our deed and escrow program. And we use the funds to acquire some homes for renovation as well. In terms of the new construction program, we use funding to support construction of 15 new homes. And these are in various stages. These are being developed by the land bank. Some are in pre-development, others are already under construction, some are completed. And we rolled out in the fall a construction gap grant program, and this is aimed at spurring investment by other developers and builders in the market. And we committed funds to support the construction of another 32 new homes. And those again are at this point in the pre-development stage. And I had referenced earlier that idea of future markets and strategic planning. You can use funding under the program in these future markets for things like feasibility studies, concept development, and land assembly. So we did deploy some of the funds for a particular target area that we are collaborating on with the city of East Cleveland, a municipal partner for this. And I think really then we could just kind of talk a little bit about what Paul had mentioned about the other component of the program. maybe I could have Pat and Andy talk a little bit about the amounts that were invested and what was happening in 2020. So Andy?
Yeah. I'll jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, for the county land bank and county contract, we were awarded $1.5 million in really kind of two components. One was for a loan loss reserve to help support the new mortgage operations and the new small dollar loans. And again, like I said, that effort is just coming to the market in the next 30 days as the spring buying starts. And for home repair, we've been working with the county's regular home repair, administering that, and then recently added the new component with the land bank in the county to this. So, we probably have about 35 different home repair jobs that are in process that I think we've had about 40 some people make applications. We got about 30 some that are in the process of being specs developed and getting bids. So like they said earlier, the work activity is really starting to pick up now.
And let me add a little bit to what I said earlier. So last year we did roughly 800 home repairs in Cuyahoga County, about $3.5 million worth of work. It was all grant money to assist, again, low-income homeowners. And we counseled about 500 Cuyahoga County homeowners, most of whom were behind in either their mortgage payments or their real estate taxes. And I can add that in the last couple of years, we've worked with 250 families who were delinquent in their real estate taxes. We were able to bring in about $1.2 million in actual payments, and then another $2.5 to $3 million in payment agreements that the families have with the county treasurer's office. So, in total, it's about 1,400 families that we served last year, and we expect maybe a slight increase this year.
Thank you, Andy. I had myself muted for a moment. Let's go on to the next question, which, and this is, I think, for all of you administering the program. What adjustments have you made in response to any lessons learned? And no particular order. Would anybody like to go first? Andy, you were just talking. Do you want me to pick on you?
Let me, there is no shortage of demand for the kind of work that we do, that CHN does, that other organizations do. And it's particularly tough for the client base that we see. As I mentioned earlier, the average for many clients is about $20. It's really tough to, own a home and pay all the expenses that are related to that and do the maintenance, et cetera. And so I have to say, Cuyahoga County has been really key in terms of investing in the kind of work that we and others do. And it's been particularly useful in that we've been able to generate over the last couple of years additional sources of money to increase the amount of work that we do.
Thank you, Andy. Pat, could we go to you?
Sure. I mean, some of the lessons, and even though a number of our home improvements, energy conservation, and other contracts are not necessarily funded only by this effort, but where we're doing, 10, 15,000 jobs a year out there. 2020, I mean, one of the adjustments was really trying to respond to COVID, right? And how to really work with, the customer base turning themselves off and not wanting you in the house, or contractors, and even if you had third-party inspectors. And So that navigating that process has been difficult, but like Andy says, there's no shortage of customers. The need doesn't stop. You try to be as sensitive as possible because a number of these things are emergency things that you need to be dealing with, and just trying to do it in a safe way that you're both controlling, the risk to the customer, as well as staff and contractors that do the work. But I mean, that has probably been one of the most difficult adjustments that need to be made last year, and even going into this year, even though it's getting a little better.
Thank you, Pat. Kim?
Yes, I would say that 2020, there were particular challenges that were, again, related to the pandemic. Early on, and as soon as this all, blew up at last March, we really immediately saw an impact in terms of contractors' willingness to continue working on our sites. And you may have run into this as well, Pat. There was just a lot of reticence. The trades were very concerned about, how do we work in the house on top of each other? We share tools. It took a couple of months until they really figured out how to run their crews in a way where they could work safely, socially distance, have multiple tool sets and whatever. So that was, the first couple of months. But we also found that in terms of us wanting to spur investment through working with other developers and supporting their development, that they were particularly reticent in terms of the economic fallout from the pandemic and looking forward, and just seeing it being somewhat murky in terms of what the demand for housing would be from people losing their jobs and so forth. So they took, they kind of just really slowed down. And the other thing that everybody was watching in this business was the cost of construction materials and how that was dramatically impacted, particularly lumber. I mean, lumber went through the roof. It was, I think, the 4 months between April and September, it was the highest 4-month increase in lumber pricing in 70 years. And it dropped a bit down in the fourth quarter, but just in the last few weeks, it's gone back up by about 10%. And there are multiple reasons, particular for lumber, but we've seen increases in the cost of doors and windows. And this again comes back to the supply chain being disrupted. Both, lumber mills and factories had to stop. They had to retrofit, again, figure out how they could have their workforces work safely in those environments. And it really, constricted the supply, and that has led to increases in construction. So again, our development partners were very concerned about going forward because they're seeing their profit margins being squeezed. Now, as we got later into the year, people were adjusting. I think in particular about on the demand side for new housing, they could see that there was opportunity. So that's when we finally did roll out our construction gap grant program. We really had to delay that to the fall until we got past that. But we were still somewhat disappointed by the response. We only had actually 4 applications. It was oversubscribed a bit, and we did award all of the funds that were available, but we did expect a more competitive round. We're looking at the next round. We're going to be tweaking the program a bit going forward, because one of the other things we learned was that with the applications we didn't get, there was not a lot of interest in developing in the hardest hit area. In fact, of the 32 homes that we awarded grants to, only 6 were either on the east side or in the eastern suburbs. And that really concerns us. So right now we are looking at putting together the next round. In fact, I just talked to our director of research, Mike Schramm, about we want to look at, can we create a sort of another market boundary inside that emerging market, and maybe for that particular program provide a higher level of subsidy and incentive to work in the areas of greatest need. So that's another adjustment we're making.
Thank you, Kim. Before we go on, I do want to ask Councilwoman Stevens and or Paul Hertig, anything from council or the administration's perspective regarding lessons learned? I mean, is there something you want to add or ask either of the other panelists before I go on?
I can't see if Cheryl is still on. If so,
Oh,
I will
yes,
defer to Cheryl first, but then I'll follow.
Cheryl, you're muted. Cheryl? Oh, you're muted. I don't know if.
And if not, I can start, but we'll yield to Cheryl when she comes in. I would say, first of all, working together with the land bank and with council staff, we decided on a 2-year commitment of the $1 million that development's involved with. So we would want to see the results as we get further into that 2-year period before we decide on any changes. But I will say we were a little bit disappointed. We had hoped wider response to the RFQ we put out. And in particular, we were hoping to see more responses to leverage in the home repair area sector, some sort of loan loss guarantee into more lending. We do understand there's a very important place for grants because there are some homeowners who simply can't afford any kind of loan and they need to be taken care of. But it is our hope that we will be able to see more actual lending by banks and other lenders for home repairs so that the small amount that we're able to allocate multiplied and create actually more capital. That would be the main thing we'd like to see done a little bit differently.
I'm sorry, I'm still present.
Good.
I didn't for some reason, my mute and I were not working well together. One of the things that we had initiated as county council last year was a community reinvestment advisory committee for county council. And that committee is 10 individuals from across the county. 3 of them are elected officials. And those 3, along with members of municipal staff and nonprofits, are talking with council with the aim of helping us understand better how to get lenders to be more proactive in our marketplace. So we started out with Key Bank, who is in a treasury agreement with Cuyahoga County. The goal of the committee right now is to move forward with some issues with Key Bank. There are like 13 on the table, but 3 became the priority of the committee over the last 30 days. Once we have worked through a series of issues and better understanding with what's going on with Key Bank, we're going to take some side trips to take a look at appraisals, because one of the things we know consistently provides a barrier to increasing values is that appraisers keep giving us lower values when we've affected the quality of an entire block. So that if you're going in those 1, 2, and 3 mile circles, the value should increase by recent investment in rehabs and sales of houses in properties that are almost adjacent, contiguous, and abutting. So using the work of the land bank, our partners at CHN and some of the other nonprofits, and working with groups like the ones that Sally leads in South Euclid, we're looking at ways to make sure that values increase as well. That's going to be really tough for us, but staff has been paying attention to the details. We're looking at data that Frank Ford and Thriving Communities brings back to us. So we are not just talking about this, we're looking at the details so that we can figure out ways to actually implement programs that trigger change. One of the programs that we focused on is HRC's Challenge program, which has been pretty effective in Cleveland Heights. And we're looking to see if we can replicate that or encourage lenders to invest more in their programming so that they can spread out into adjacent zip codes or adjacent communities and do more. So this is going to take, and that is this industry, continuous attention and continuous investment beyond a 1 or 2 year time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The next question, and I believe it's possible that some of you may have already touched upon this a little bit, but how the program is responding specifically to those depressed housing values in the east side of Cleveland and the east inner suburbs. Wonder if any of you could expound on that a little bit further.
I'll jump in for a second. I think that certainly for the home repairs program that we're working on and delivering those services, they're not appraisal sensitive, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to have needed capital improvements and major repairs for the health and safety items, roofs and porches and, upgrades to their systems that are going to occur regardless of kind of how depressed the particular market is, which is really, fundamentally hitting that kind of social aspect of how do you assist those existing homeowners and stop the ongoing decay. So I think that's a big piece. I think, having more first mortgage activity that will be provided to areas that don't start with a loan that's $80,000 or $100,000. That's something at $30,000. If the market is $30,000 or $40,000, that now the access to having real mortgage financing also does that same aspect. So I think just those two products themselves will really address some concerns of operating in markets that are a bit more depressed than others.
Thank you, Pat. Andy, since we were just talking about home repair, you want to add something to that too?
Let's see if I could. Yeah. So as with CHN, much of our work is in terms of home repair is really geared towards quality of life kinds of issues. I mean, we work with families who have had no running water for a couple of years. We have seniors who have their heating system went out, and so they use a space heater and they pretty much live in one room. And so, the quality of life becomes really important, but it also, the home repair work that we do, also adds to increasing I think the value of the property, so that when, ultimately the property is transferred or sold, that it has greater value for the family.
Thank you, Andy. Kim, can you add anything further?
No, I think, our primary concern is just about there doesn't seem to be enough private investment going into that area on the development side. So we'll try to boost the amount of grant that we can provide to try to close that bigger gap in that area to help get things moving there. Of the 6 houses that we're supporting out of the GAP program this year, on the east side, there was really only 1 in the city in the Fairfax neighborhood, and there were 5 in the inner ring suburbs. So there really just is not enough going on in that area. And so we're going to focus more on that with the round 2 of our program this year.
Okay. Councilwoman,
Frank,
please go ahead.
I actually, staff is helping me. Khalil looked at something that was sent in by a couple of the people in the room. I think Kamala from Shaker Heights asked about housing market trends. We do not have information based on racial demographics, but we do know which census tracts in the core city and the inner ring suburbs have the highest percentage of African American residents. And so we can do some locational calculations with our friends like Mr. Ford, Mike Schramm on Kim's team at the land bank, and our staff at the county. I think those 3 groups will need to collaborate to help us track if we're making any impact. Kim, your work has been, you've completed a full year when? In September?
No, in December.
So that way we'll be able to take a look at what the statistics were, right, and if there's been any nudge up. On Kim's team, I swear by Schramm's data. And most folks who've interacted with him and the folks at Case Western Reserve know that we have a good way to get a good grasp of that. And if the data is too low, what we're going to have to kibitz about is what we think are appropriate markers and how we help the groups make sure that we make enough opportunities available. So how we help CHN, how we help, I want to call Andy's group a different name, but it's not that name anymore, so I won't say anything. That's showing my age. And how we help all our partners, because remember, the county is the partner group. How we help all our partners reach out in multiple different ways so that we can have a statistically significant impact. Did I forget anything, Paul?
I would just add that how equity in housing is an important part of equity overall. And we stand ready and will continue to support the policy leadership of council. And I have equal respect for the robust data system over at the land bank. So we look forward to continuing the collaboration.
Thank you, Paul. Before we move on, something that Councilwoman Stevens said reminded me that I failed to mention, although it was in my earlier slide, that all the data that I presented is from Case Western Reserve, courtesy of Mike Schramm. So we're all relying upon Mike Schramm. Thank you, Mike, if he's on. But
I checked earlier. Yeah. He was on earlier anyway.
Yeah. So the next question is, to some extent, a subset of the one that we just talked about, the depressed housing values. And one of the significant reasons for those depressed values is the presence and continued presence of blighted homes that may, in many cases, be not feasible for rehab. And I guess the question, with limited resources that we have now for demolition, is there a way the program is going to be able to prioritize the removal or redevelopment of those blighted and vacant properties?
Frank, this year we actually will be doing another 6 million of demolitions. We do have, we've been really blessed in our relationship with OFA, and over the last 2 years in increments, we've actually been able to receive an additional $10 million in increments over the last 2 years. So every time we think we're about running out of HHF, we get a call from OFA saying, hey, do you want another 300,000? And we just had that conversation about a month ago for another 500,000. Now, that being said, that program will be totally winding down by the end of June. So that will be the end of it, sadly. We are still using county demolition program funds. We have about $800,000 that we're using this year of our round 8. It's about another $1.5 million or so from the round 9 suburban demos we're still working on. And then the clawback funds, and this is money clawed back from rounds 1 through 7, are being provided to us this year. Another about that'll allow us to do about another $2.5 million. And we're also going to use about $1 million from our reserves to support demo this year. So that's about 6 million. We'll probably be able to do around, I don't know, 450 or so demos this year. It's really looking into 2022 where there's more concern about what do we do then. And as you pointed out in your presentation earlier, there's still, a lot of properties out there that appear to be, have postal vacancy. It was interesting, though, as we've been pulling more properties to use up these additional HHF, we've been acquiring more properties, looking primarily at forfeiture, properties on forfeiture. And one of the things we've observed is when we've sent out our inspectors, just to give you an example, recently they looked at a batch of 100 properties, residential properties on forfeiture, and it appeared to them that 70 of them were occupied. And these are properties on state forfeiture that are blighted. And it's really kind of astounding that there are people occupying a lot of these really substandard homes. So, that universe of thousands of properties, we don't know exactly how many of those are occupied, but we're seeing evidence that a number of them are. So they're really not, candidates for us to take.
Right.
They're not vacant.
Excuse me, Frank, if I could add something to Kim's point there about the substantial number of foreclosed properties out there. One of the things in my other life that I do is look at what is a deficit of affordable housing in safe and decent condition in Northeast Ohio. And I'm using OFA data. In Cuyahoga County, there's a 54,000 unit deficit approximately. I round in my mind. And if you go to OFA's website and look for the affordable housing statistics, there's a section that tells you what it is for all of the 88 counties. And so I pay close attention to us, naturally, a data nerd. And Shram can correct me if I'm really too far wrong. But what that tells us is that we have way too many units that are substandard or not affordable in this county. And that is why demolition was so important, because we have families staying in housing units that we wouldn't put our worst enemies in. So demolition helped eliminate some of those housing units, but the work that our nonprofits do to create new housing units in new construction or rehab, those that still have good bones, is incredibly important, because with the loss of income that the pandemic has created, people will go into these housing units if they can secure them with a little work and put their family in them and jerry-rig the electricity and the water so that they can live in them. And that's what Kim's team is finding.
Thank you, Councilwoman. That's a really good point. Kim, I wanted to go back to something because it occurred to me with so many people on this meeting. If you could talk a little bit about, some people may wonder, well, why can't we just renovate? I'm sorry, I have a phone ringing in my room here. Sorry about that. If some people may be wondering, well, why can't we just renovate these homes? And when you think about a street that may have 5 homes that are vacant, and maybe 3 of them are good candidates for renovation and 2 might not be. Talk a little bit about what's the finances involved there, and how does the presence of those you can't rehab undermine the potential viability of the ones you are going to rehab?
Right.
Talk about the numbers a little bit, the numbers involved.
Yeah, I mean, when we under our deed and escrow program, we do write specs, and then when an investor or a potential owner occupant is interested in the house, we really sit down and we walk them through the spec. And this is really a spec that would take it up to code plus. It's not like a total rehab. It's just to get it, above code. And really for these properties, because of how old the housing stock is in Cuyahoga County, we're looking at, easily, a minimum of 30,000, probably some of them go up to 50, some go up to even 80,000. And when you get to that point, it's just not feasible. So it depends on the particular submarket as to what will work. But most of them, it only works if you're really under about 50,000. 35 to 50,000 is maybe kind of the sweet spot there. And then, in terms of the homes that people are interested in, of course, they're looking at what's surrounding that house. If they want to move into the house as an owner occupant, they don't want to be living around, properties where the surrounding houses are, falling down. So in terms of the county housing program funding, it does allow, starting in the second year, which would be this year, it does allow for some of the program funds to be used for strategic demolition. It can't just be used broad-based for demo anywhere, but some of the dollars can be used for demolition related to these other activities that are being supported by the program. So people have to be, we just have to be more careful about where those funds are being used. I mean, again, this is a $30 million program, but it's over 6 years. So there's about $5 million a year. About $1 million has been devoted this year and last year and this year towards the home repair and the small mortgages. So that leaves about $4 million for everything else, for all the development, the renovation, the demolition. So we will look to this a little bit for demo. I think next year we do have some other funds we would look to, just in terms of maybe more reserve, some more from reserves. We can't do a lot there, but we also have we have a lien collection fund where we've been able to collect on some of the demolition liens. It's not a lot of money. It's about maybe in this point about $1.5 million. It'll grow a little bit. So that would be funds we would probably be looking for demo in 22, but it doesn't begin to address really the bigger need.
Thank you, Kim. Before we go to open this up to the audience questions, there's one last question, which is, if each of you could address briefly, what are the goals and objectives for 2021 this year? And no particular order. Anybody want to go first?
Well, I don't have a magic wand at the county level, because if I did, I would, one of the things that was in the chat room is I would cause both to have more funds available for both the 9 and 4% tax credits so that we could do more and larger projects that would create both new construction and substantial rehab opportunities, as well as provide some additional demolition money. And to be sensitive to a variety of communities' needs, because people don't always understand this. Even some of our communities that have higher profiles, like Shaker, have needs for demo and rehab and new construction. And some of our smaller, less high-profile communities, like East Cleveland, need specific targeted assistance to move from their neighborhoods that have some strength in them into and expand from that. So those are things we need to keep a focus on. The work that the land bank is doing and some of our higher profile nonprofits who are stronger, they're incredibly important. Thank you.
Thank you. Still have a few minutes, and I would like to get any further thoughts from either Kim, Pat, or Andy, or Paul on goals and objectives for 2021.
Well,
Ready?
this is Paul. I will say we can't ignore the fact that we're trying to recover from COVID, and we've had to expend a lot of energy over the past year just putting out fires and supporting people on an emergency basis. In the area of housing, you know, we clearly see a lot of distress in the rental segment. And I think this is not only for the tenants themselves, but also for the landlords, many of whom have not been receiving income they may have been counting on, especially for the smaller landlords. So I think that as we think about 2021, we want to see how hopefully there's going to be some additional federal resources available, which we want to maximize and use strategically. And then as we get through the year, we're hoping things get closer to a normal economy moving on into 2022. That kind of goes beyond the little $1 million a year we're involved with under the housing plan, but I think we want to make sure that that million is used strategically in light of all these other things that are happening.
Thank you, Paul. Pat, Andy, or Kim?
Sure. I mean, for us, even though, just like Paul says, you know, working through the new norm of COVID, you know, we're looking for probably 125 to 150 small dollar loans in our areas throughout the county and the city. You know, maybe somewhere around $3.5 to $4 million of new first mortgages, both through our current programs and the new funded effort. And then for home repairs, again, we do think that, you know, in the home repair program, because it's you know, $20,000 per up to per loan. You know, we're looking probably between 50 to 60 different loans across the board, and there doesn't seem to be a lull in people applying there. So we think that's a doable proposition for this year.
So this is Andy. You know, if we had 10 times as much money, we'd have 10 times as many clients for home repair. There's really just this huge demand. And so one of our goals for this year and 2022 is to increase the amount of dollars that we have available for low income homeowners so that they can stay in their homes. And then no one knows what's going to happen in terms of the mortgage moratorium, which ends June 30th. Will there be a rash of foreclosure filings? Right now in Cuyahoga County, the number of foreclosure filings has gone down. I think there, Frank, I think you know this, there's been a slight increase in the number of filings in the last month or two, but nothing, I think, significant. But we don't know what's going to happen when the moratorium ends. And so we are sort of looking, we're going to plan for an increase in the number of clients so that we can we can sort of work out plans with them, with their mortgage servicers or with their lenders.
Thank you. Kim?
Yes, we're planning to start another, get another 19 or so in-house new construction projects, at least into pre-development this year. Again, another round on the construction gap grant program, do another 6 in-house rehabs, and then our deed and escrow program. We're hoping to do about 24. We are running into some inventory issues on the rehab side. Part of this was caused by the pandemic, where, you know, the court was shut down for quite a while. Sheriff sales finally resumed. They're online. They're not the same volume as they had been. So it's just taking longer for, you know, vacant and abandoned properties to get through the whole system to come into us to support the rehab inventory. So we're a little concerned about on the rehab side. And just one other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe I touched on this earlier, but we are working closely with East Cleveland, and we do expect to do more in-depth planning with them for development of a target area there. So that's a focus for this year as well.
Thank you. So we're not too far behind, just a couple minutes in our schedule. I'm going to move to the questions that have been in the chat and see if we can get through as many of these as possible. The first one was concern about money which has been, I guess, the DTAC fund that the county has been used for demo. And I guess there's a concern that money will be diverted from DTAC. DTAC funds will be diverted from demolition. And Kim, have I expressed that well, or do you know what that's about? Could you
We actually have used very little DTAC money for demo over the years. We've used primarily federal and other county programs to support that. Yeah, we don't really use DTAC for that. DTAC has really been used primarily to pay for our overhead, and now, you know, it's over time we're going to be spending more and more of it, devoting more and more of it to this county housing program. So the DTAC issue isn't really related to demolition. It's really the demise of the federal and county programs.
Yeah, you know what I might do, and this is a little bit out of the ordinary, but the question was raised by Councilman Brancatelli. Tony, are you able to, could you clarify what you were saying there?
Sure, so long as I step away from my general fund budget, because we're talking about cutting lots at City Hall.
Okay.
And unlike the county land bank, which cuts their lots on a regular basis, City Hall does it once every 8 weeks if we're fortunate. We don't have that same robust program. What more is just we haven't had to use DTAC funds because we've had other alternative funds for demolition. So we've been blessed to have some of the Moving Ohio Forward, some of the recovery funds that came in. But now that those funds aren't here, we're all hoping that we're going to get additional funds. And we know that some great folks have been chasing down additional dollars. And because the county land bank has been so good at being able to use these funds, they've been able to get reallocation. So that's great news. It's just now that these funds are drying up, diverting DTAC dollars, which could be used for demolition if we had to, into housing programs is a concern. So that's because we're starting to see the rise in vacant properties again. And Frank, you and I have talked about, you know, even though the foreclosures are down, we're seeing an abundance of properties that people are walking away from. We don't know why they're walking away from some of these, but there's a lot to be said around, you know, the city issued 500 vacate orders last year. There's a lot of different reasons why these distressed homes are being walked away from, or whether it's lack of access to additional dollars. And so those small loan funds that the small mortgages that CHN and others are putting together, and Lutheran Housing and others, and I'm going to always say the old names. Sorry, it's still the Jake at downtown for me. You know, those are helpful, but it's just a small piece of the bigger issues that we're facing, especially along the east side.
Thank you for the clarification, Councilman. So the next question is anyone looking at the pent-up demand for dwellings, homes, and rentals? What does that mean for the recovery in 2021 and 2022? And I'm wondering if anybody wants to take a stab at that. and I'm assuming the pent-up demand refers to the fact that there's fewer homes on the market. So
Yes, I can talk about that a little bit. You know, under our deed and escrow program, we are seeing a huge increase in interest from investors. For this particular program, the county housing program, we're providing some subsidy, but that subsidy is really aimed at supporting projects where either it's an owner occupant, or that's our priority. But second behind that would be if there no owner occupant comes forward, we would work with an investor provided they were going to sell the house. Because what we want to see is that there's a sale and there's a comp created, and that creates value that helps all the adjacent property owners. We're not, there is a lot of interest in investor for rent. We're not supporting that through this particular program.
okay. Follow-up question was specifically related to COVID-19, that the program appears to be focused on single-family owner-occupied dwellings, yet a large segment of the county is renters. Is there anything in this program that's addressing the demand after post-COVID-19? If there are a significant amount of evictions, will there be housing for people? Any thoughts, anybody? Particularly with regard to availability of rental housing.
Yeah, I don't think that the way the program was designed, it didn't specifically focus on rental assistance programs. I think that was identified as a need, as Gus mentioned earlier, in the county housing plan, which was very broad and looked across the spectrum of housing issues. But I think that council's intent, and maybe Cheryl or Khalil could chime in, was really for this program to focus more narrowly on sort of stabilizing and strengthening the housing markets, the for sale housing markets.
Okay. Another COVID-related question was, do any of us see a repeat of the 2007 foreclosure crisis due to high unemployment related to COVID-19 and the future end of mortgage forbearance and moratoriums on both eviction and on foreclosure, well, specifically related to foreclosure here? And I wonder if, I mean, I have some thoughts about it, but let me see if anybody else does. Does anybody have any thoughts about that first?
Sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen.
Yeah, it could be that there are some, here's some things I have been tracking, and I haven't circulated this probably as widely as I should. I tend to circulate it to the monthly group that I chair, the Vacant Abandoned Property Action Council. I've been looking at monthly unemployment, foreclosure filings, and 90-day delinquencies of mortgages. And what was interesting is that unemployment did go sky high April, May, June, I forget the specific numbers, but it was a dramatic increase. But then it started to come back down again as our society was reopening from being really shut down in April. And it didn't come back to normal, but as of December, it seemed to plateau and was maybe coming back up again. So there is still a danger that there will be back to high unemployment. I think the key is, vaccinations. The vaccinations are the key to opening the economy. Opening the economy is the key to having employment. Employment is the key to making rent and mortgage payments. So I'm not making a prediction here, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel if things keep moving forward, that by the end of this calendar year. I don't know that we will see. I'm afraid of saying this because somebody's going to say, well, Frank, you told us there wasn't going to be a foreclosure crisis coming again. So take this with some caution, but that's my thought. Anybody else want to add anything on that before we move on? Okay.
Yeah,
please.
I'll just throw in, and it's a very small microcosm. It's not like you're predicting the stock market, Frank. I'll move my money for you. But CHN Housing Capital, we have our own mortgage, first mortgage program, and this is relating to our own customers. And we saw we tried to get ahead of it a little bit by, as soon as this happened, to get a deferral program. So, you know, letting all our customers know immediately that if you have hours cut, if you have job loss, if you have, you know, COVID illness, please, you know, make application and we'll be able to, you know, move 3 or 4 of your mortgage payments to the end of your loan until you can get out of the situation. And just amazingly, that very few people, maybe 10 people out of 150, 175 people actually took advantage of it. And so at least our portfolio is not seeing like, you know, massive disruption. And so I guess for me, the question is, you know, what's the end game for the other lenders, the private lenders? Are they going to be able to, you know, keep their investment whole and still make their money by doing deferments and moving things in a reasonable way, or as foreclosure, are they going to be able to, you know, make more money doing that? And the answer is I don't know. But you know, if it's any test of a small sample, we did not see major impact that way.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Next question was, are banks making any shifts toward more support of low dollar mortgages? Which banks are doing that? And can the county influence bank policies locally? And I will definitely turn it over to Councilwoman Stevens in a moment, but I will say that I gave a presentation in November at a Zoom forum on my most recent bank lending research, which did find that this question, particularly of loans in the 50,000 range, 30, 40, 50, or 60,000, that none of the banks were really doing great at meeting that need. And yet there are 2 banks in particular who actually have in the last year enacted some new policies that might make a difference, and we may not see that for another year when the next data comes out. But one would be, and I hope I've got this right, I think it's Fifth Third decided to change their bank officer, loan officer compensation practice. I mean, so the issue is, does a bank loan officer want to work on a $40,000 mortgage when they could be spending their time in the outer suburbs working on a $300,000 mortgage? And I think it was Fifth Third that agreed to compensate loan officers with a floor of, they'd get, even if it's a $40,000 loan, they'd get compensated on their commission as though it were a $100,000 or $120,000 loan. That was one innovation, and we'll have to see what difference that makes. The other one was, I think it was Huntington. Another issue is that when there's a $40,000 loan, the fees that are associated with a standard loan might make that loan look disproportionately like a high cost loan compared to the same fees being on a $100,000 loan. And the federal regulators frown on high cost loans. So I think it was Huntington that was willing to waive those fees. But the problem is that we don't have the data yet. The data for bank lending comes out about a year late. So it may be next fall before we know if these are making a difference. But I do want to offer Councilwoman Stevens an opportunity, because I know that you have opinions on this and you feel strongly about it. You're smiling and laughing now.
Okay, so everybody who's ever met me on this conference knows I've got opinions about anything to do with housing. Yeah. And Kim sees my homework. Maybe it's mostly in files now, but there's written comments. And so everybody from the land bank to the smallest housing nonprofit in Cuyahoga County probably knows my opinions on this. We need to encourage our banks. In some ways, it'll be through the community reinvestment legislation, our conversations with the Federal Reserve on how they can do more for the marketplaces where they have large depository relationships. It is something that we need to continuously keep on our to-do list, and not only on our to-do list, but to actually work to make sure that they understand the significance of our commitments to that. Frank is working with council and our staff to make sure we move forward on these issues. Khalil, are you still on the Zoom meeting? because he was texting me something and I couldn't read it on my phone. The other issues we're working on?
There was a mention earlier about in the chat about rental assistance and making sure that we're looking out for people who are not necessarily in owner-occupied structures. I think the housing program that the council passed doesn't focus specifically on rental assistance. I think that, we're approaching that from other avenues at the county, but I think there is something to be said, at least a little bit, for the home repair assistance piece of the housing program that provides assistance to homeowners. And the legislation does not specify that these are owner-occupied structures. I want to make that clear. There are portions that are specific to owner-occupied structures. This home repair piece is not specific to owner-occupied structures, and I think that we should pay attention to that and encourage, to the degree that we can, landlords to utilize that and improve the quality of the homes that they're renting. One hopes that the subsidized assistance that we're providing allows them to continue to provide this housing at more affordable rates. I think the other thing to consider is that when you increase the supply of high quality rental housing, that's just a general benefit. We want people as much as possible to be in high quality housing and not substandard housing or housing with health and safety issues. And when you increase the supply of higher standard rental housing, that also has an impact on the market and the pricing of that rental housing. So I think that we should pay close attention to that home repair piece of the housing program as it relates to rental housing.
Thank you. Thank you. Paul, did we miss anything? You're muted, Paul.
Yeah, that phrase. Agree wholeheartedly with Khalil that we'd like to see capital available for owners of rental housing as well. We need to be conscious that rental is not all one market. There are some large corporate landlords, but there are also some small mom and pop landlords. And sometimes we confuse, everything together. There's sometimes a feeling that landlords don't deserve any help. But I think we need to be careful there because some of the small mom and pop landlords are very much in need of assistance so that they can provide safe, decent, affordable housing. And I think we should work to provide that in a fair manner, as well as assisting homeowners.
Thank you, Paul. The next
Frank,
question. Oh,
Frank,
sorry.
I just wanted to chime in on exactly what Paul and these guys were saying, that the one thing we did certainly do with a carve out on our home repair and this new funding was to make it available to owner-occupied persons who have two families. And so it can improve both the individual home that the owner is living in, but also, just like Paul was saying, kind of the mom and pop, the person who owns a two-family. And we've kind of restricted it where that if somebody's going to get a $20,000 a home improvement, that they can't just put it in the unit that the owner lives in, that it has to go in both the tenant unit and the owner unit, or it has to be a common repair that will add value to the entire aspect, including the tenant's unit too. So we did that small carve out, but it's a bigger issue. I agree with you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, and I figured out how to get my chats to pop up, but in a small way on my screen. One of our former colleagues, Ken Surratt, chats in that they are working at the Federal Reserve to look at ways to encourage and provide incentives for banks to lend in our outreach regarding increasing their CRA participation in these kinds of ways. And so dialogue with folks like Ken Surratt and his peer group or colleagues at the Federal Reserve is incredibly important. I say this because I don't always remember to look at the chats when I'm participating in a Zoom, but here's one that's incredibly important, especially since it's now time to give the feds our opinions on what's good CRA and what's not. So please remember these kinds of things and don't hesitate to write letters, especially with banks like Huntington and is merging with a bank in Michigan. Now's the time to send in letters. The things that Huntington has done right, we should praise them for, and the things we want them to do better, we should talk to them about.
Good point. Thank you, Councilwoman. The next question is somewhat related to what we've just been talking about. In the areas that have been those that banks are reluctant to lend in, are there resources, funds, or loans available for the non-owner occupant investor who wants to improve their property in these hard-hit areas? I'm not sure. Does the county's help program only for owner occupants, or Paul?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I am struggling to remember what the contract says. I believe we did not limit it. I want to reserve the right to correct that if I'm wrong, but I believe we focused on the value of the property, which has to be under $250,000, and a limitation per unit in multifamily properties. But for the most part, however, we've seen owner occupants applying for that program. It's been marketed that way. So one consideration would be, if it's not either available or being marketed that way, to consider either changing the rules or marketing it better to the small investors.
Is Sarah Parks Jackson in the audience today?
She was.
Sarah, can you unmute yourself and chime in?
Keisha at Home Repair Resource Center might have some.
Yes, I did see
well.
Keisha as well.
I agree. I was thinking of calling on Keisha too.
I saw Keisha. Keisha, are you still there?
I'm here. This is Sarah. So, good afternoon. I was trying to, while Paul was talking, I was trying to look up the help program rules real quick, and then Cheryl called my name. But I would have to agree with Paul, but if you give me 2 more minutes, I'll come back and I'll have the
Okay,
answer.
then let us go to Keisha. Keisha,
Yes.
the mic is, if you'll unmute yourself.
And
I'm sorry,
specifically,
I got a little distracted with something. But are we talking about the repair products for investor or
For investors.
for investors? I think Kamala actually responded in the chat since we've been on, seeing that help is available to investment properties. This is something we're looking and exploring and expanding one of our loan guarantee programs, the Challenge Fund, and making it more accessible to all property owners. So yes, we would definitely be interested in having investor-owned properties eligible for, but currently right now, they're only for owner-occupied.
Excellent.
And it kind of goes to the point in which Andy was talking about, health and safety, and really just trying to keep a sustainable household and with the repairs versus necessarily trying to create, revenue. But we're open to many options. So yes.
So this is Paul. I will note that we in fact publish on our website that the help program is open to investment properties.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Sarah. I was going to say the same. So.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. I want to ask Chip, I have a question for you just in terms of the agenda said 1:55, we would do closing remarks by you, but I'm wondering, do you mind if we go right up to 1 minute before 2 and then you make closing remarks? Gives us
Sure.
Okay, so
Excuse me, I have a county council meeting at 2 o'clock. So I need to excuse myself. I want to thank you for allowing me to participate, but I'm not blowing you off and there's nothing wrong with my internet.
Yeah, we very much appreciate your attendance and participation, really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, let me go to the next question, which is regarding Glenville in particular. Will we see an increase in value within the Glenville neighborhood due to Glen Village? There's significant commercial, retail, and housing investment to address historic lack of investment. Let's see, we should track this neighborhood to determine whether the investments are working. I hate to confess that I'm not familiar with Glen Village. And wondering if someone who's on the panel could specifically talk about Glen Village. Anybody?
Frank, I can't talk about Glen Village, but just in the Glenville community, and I know we work with the city of Cleveland with the Mayor's Neighborhood Initiative Transformation Project, which is both a new construction and a renovation effort in a targeted area right in the Glenville community. So 2 builders are building new homes, and Famicos is rehabbing homes, and customers without an income eligibility requirement can buy those homes and receive a $20,000 forgivable down payment to assist them in that purchase. So if that's anywhere near the area that's in question, I know there's certainly a buzz of activity going on there.
And actually, I will add that my own research did suggest that even though the median price for Glenville generally was low, it actually becomes higher when you get to the streets that are adjacent to University Circle. So the University Circle impact on Glenville has potential to see an increase. And again, if Glen Village is near there, that could make a difference as well.
Glen Village is part of the development that was done with West Finch, the big 105.
Oh.
97th there, Tony.
Yeah, so it's and it's also part of the scattered site new construction, as well as some of the rehabs that Famicos is doing. So what was surprising that I put in my notes was that the scattered site housing did not need any of the subsidy. The new housing is being built without subsidy, but built more with the cooperation with the lending institutions, going up to 125% median, 125% loan value. So it's having a big impact over that area and seeing the prices move and the market change.
Then the answer, I think, is to the question that yes, there certainly could be an increase. I think that was a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, Frank, let me just add that we did a sizable number of home repairs through the Mayor's Neighborhood Transformation Initiative last year in that area. And I saw that one of the chat questions dealt with roofs, and one of the things that we were able to do was a fair number of roof repairs and roof replacements for a lot of those homes. So,
thank you, Andy. Next question, and it may end up being our last. Is there an indicator to track or know if home repair and mortgage loan programs are helping to build wealth for Black homeowners? What I've done is more broadly by neighborhood and region, and it would suggest that there's, even though things are low, things are on an upward swing. But is the land bank, is Mike Schramm going to work any magic to try to track that very specifically? Do you know, Kim?
We'll be doing every year. I think what Cheryl was alluding to in part was that every year under the ordinance, we'll be doing statistical analysis jointly with DOD. So we did that in January and submitted it to council. And that really will serve as the baseline for this program. And we'll be tracking against that to see, if there'll be improvements over the next 6 years. I don't know that we're looking specifically at the wealth issue, but that's something we, could be looked at.
It may be that just merely looking at the value of homes, which suggests the equity that people are gaining, would be valuable. Unfortunately, we are out of time. And Chip, well, first I want to thank everybody, the participation we had, the questions we had, the panel, and Chip, is there a way that we could post the questions that were in the chat, even including the ones we didn't get to?
Yes, I'm sure there is. There's magic in electronics, and we can do that. Okay. But let me just also thank our panelists and Frank Ford for putting this together. He did a lot of the heavy lifting and putting the design of these questions and getting the speakers together. And thank all of our sponsors and everybody who's worked on this project. And the one thing that I kept hearing is there needs to be more money. There just is simply not enough resources for small dollar loans, for roof repairs. I remember Blaine Griffin standing in front of a home, and there it was, the roof was just leaking right through, and the woman couldn't get any loans for her roof. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for Cleveland. And it's a tragedy for a deeply segregated city such as Cleveland. And wealth is appreciated, and its wealth is generational. And in Cleveland, a lot of that has hurt a lot of families. So thank you all. And we'll be posting everything. And again, Frank and everybody who's been working on this for all these many years, a great discussion, great focus, and great participation. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.